Welcome to Gray Overload, and I'm going to talk about AMD naming again. This is ridiculous. There's another report out that AMD is going to jump the motherboards from 700, or not being 700, but go all the way to 800. Um, it seems like it's just beating Intel. There was also another report that AMD was going to change the what was it? The instead of doing 100 series, they were going to go to Ryzen AI 300. At this point, AMD just needs to take that marketing team and say, "You guys are done. We're done with the marketing team. You guys are horrible. We don't need you anymore because if you're just going to copy names and go a little bit above Intel." Intel's already done that marketing for us, so we don't need to do that. And really, all this is doing is we'll get into some things, but it's getting down to confusion of the AMD Ryzen products and any other products that they decide to keep changing these names. People are not going to understand the naming schemes for the motherboards, the processors, any of that, and it's going to be a uphill battle moving forward for AMD, and we'll get into the kind of some of the reasons why. But if you want the same numbers as or one better than Intel and Nvidia, then why do you have why do you have a marketing team? That it doesn't make any sense. And I think people that work well should be able to keep their jobs, but obviously there's nobody working well in the marketing department at AMD. These ideas are horrible. You want, and one thing I touched on before is you want consistency in naming. You want to build a brand up. You want to have a brand solid, something that is, people are easy to understand, that people know if I, buy this product, the next one out, I can expect to be this. We keep a progression, and we can keep on moving forward in these numbering systems or whatever the naming system is, so that we can go through it. I mean, even the Radeon products. Let's just take a look at that. Right? You had Fury, you had Vega, then you had 5000, and then you had. You had the 6,000, then the 7,000 series, and hopefully 8,000 is next, right? There's some consistency there, but that was, if we go back a little bit further, you had, the 400, the 500, then the Fury, mixed in there, then the Vega. There's been a whole bunch of jumping around because before, if you take a step even back further, there was like, what was it, 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 back when it was ATI. So there's been a lot of numbering confusion just in Radeon alone. Now you're looking at trying to do that, bring that over to the confusion of your Ryzen AI, which is just a dumb name, AMD, just a dumb name. Don't do it. And then you're going to jump motherboard series up. I don't see a need to jump the motherboard series. People that are in the AM5 socket or looking at boards are going to look at the 700 series, if you're going to have those out, or the 600 series, and determine, hey, this is a board. No one, I talk to and I help people build computers and stuff like that. No one's ever saying, which board of this versus that. The one issue I do have, AMD, because you did decide to copy Intel, is that people do get confused between the Intel boards and the AMD boards because their numberings are so close. People do, it's not all the time, but there is some confusion there because some of these numbers are close enough to being like, which one is it, right? And that's one thing I wish AMD wouldn't have done to begin with, but they were trying to build up the brand. I can look back and see that, I wish you wouldn't have did it. I think even back then I said, I wish you wouldn't have done this, but it was what they're trying to do, build off of what Intel already done. You already done that. Now you are in a position where you have kind of the, performance crowned in some areas. You have an established brand with Ryzen and Zen to see how this all goes. Build off of that. Don't change it. Don't be, saying I have to change it to whatever Intel's doing because Intel, we're following Intel. You're leading in this area. Kind of use some leadership, and AMD marketing isn't used to leadership. So eventually no one's going to know what these numbers mean. People are going to just be more confused about it. They're just going to go through and be like, okay, well, I don't know what this is. Intel has ironed out their naming scheme. They go up in an incremental fashion. I guess I'll just go with Intel, right? I guess I'll just go with NVIDIA. I know the next thing what it's going to be, and there's not going to be a huge change, a name change. We can argue about, and I've even kind of said this about NVIDIA's stupidity about DDR5, different memory, calling the card the same, different gigabytes of RAM on the card, all that other stuff. But this is more about the whole branding naming and the numbering of a system of these stacks, which is really kind of crazy where AMD is starting at random numbers or skipping numbers. It really makes it hard for somebody to understand what's really going on. And then, NVIDIA did a change from GTX to RTX, but they kept the same numbering system, so you kind of knew where in the stack that was going to be. And I even feel like that was, a little bit out there, but that's even more logical as a standpoint, unless they wanted to reset their whole, and they could have reset their whole naming scheme if they wanted to, as NVIDIA could, as their market leader, and they lead from the front, and they lead from a notifying change, and they market it very well. AMD doesn't have that. So once you get something established, AMD, with your marketing the way it is, you just have to stick with it and stop jumping all over the place. Um, you know, jumping around, this is something I was writing down and thinking of, is putting the consumer of wherein the products do fit in performance, how good that product is. Why did the number jump so much? Is there that much of a difference? Why is there a skipping in a number? One thing that comes to mind, was there a problem with that next generation? Do we have to be concerned about this one that is coming out? That is something that does happen, and people do voice that concerns. And why wasn't there a logical starting point? This doesn't make any sense. And people ask these questions, maybe they can put their mind at ease and something like this, but people ask these questions to me. I'm like, uh, there was a dumb decision someplace. And another part of this is that, as people get confused and what does it mean they're looking for it, and let's say you have great performance, right? And you can just sell the product off of the performance alone. That's great. That is a good thing, and people are willing to just buy into a platform based upon performance. The confusion will really start, and it gets amplified if you're in close competition, right? If you're like, okay, now what motherboards do I have to go with? Why did it jump up? Everything else. And what people don't want is to have a complex decision, right? I have to jump through and figure out which CPU it was that changed the generation. Now we're on a step above in the motherboard numbering, which doesn't make any sense to me. I know Intel is just the next number up and the next number up. I know that those are going to work. We're off to the races. Let's just go with Intel. I don't have to deal with all the confusion. And that's what you're risking, AMD, is jumping around, and people are going to gravitate to the one that doesn't have all the complications to it. And if AMD just keeps doing these naming schemes, there is really no need for the marketing department. None, because the marketing department, I think, has failed AMD quite a bit. And that, by the way, that means that the management that has put this marketing team in there needs to look internally at themselves, or say, I am also the problem, right? This is, somebody at the top has to make the decisions of these marketing teams, and sometimes it's always not at the, sometimes maybe the marketing people have a good idea and it gets shot down. Whoever is doing that, there is a problem, and you might just have to either recuse yourself or just say, you know what, maybe I am the problem and I don't need to be here anymore. Sometimes that's the side of it. If people are doing well and doing well in their jobs, they should be able to keep their jobs. That's why it's hard for me, especially when you see studios and stuff, people getting laid off, you're like, not all those people were bad at their job, right? I like that. But when you have an incompetency in a company, you do have to take a look and be like, something really drastically needs to change so that we have a good team to show off these good products. AMD has had some good products. I mean, you look at Anti-Lag 2, that came out. I think that that's going to be a good product, as in Counter-Strike 2, but that was what, announced on a Friday? Like, whose decision was it to announce it on a Friday in the afternoon when nobody's going to be paying attention to news? That's like, you slip things in on a Friday afternoon to make sure that nobody talks about it. That's that's the thing. So there, a lot of the stuff just, the naming schemes, everything's out there. And if AMD's running, groups on this to try to figure out what the best naming scheme is and came up with this stuff, they must not have taken that from anybody, just in the consumer population, right? I deal with people building computers, fixing computers, helping them fix problems with their computers all the time, and I get feel the questions from people that, that when they go to a store, they have no idea what the processors are out there. They have a vague recollection or understanding of Intel, Nvidia, and AMD. Like, they're vague. They're, great people in what they do, and they just don't pay attention to the stuff like I do. So that's why they call me. And if AMD expects this to be clear for them, I can tell you for sure, 100% without a doubt, these people are going to be looking at me like crazy when I try to explain naming. If anything's going to be, if they're going to come up with some of those naming schemes within the next year, people are going to be, I'm going to feel more questions on what to buy than I ever have before. And I'm sure that people out there that also deal as they're the IT person, they help people buy, are going to be feeling these questions for these people too. And it's just, I've talked to the Best Buy salespeople. I've talked to people that sell computers, and they're not the most knowledgeable people out there selling it, right? They're trying to, have a job and, make income, and they have a lot of things to do. They're not dived into it like I am, and I understand that. So that's why I get the calls, and it's going to be harder to sell and everything else. And I don't think AMD and their marketing team understand this. So hopefully, I wish that this was going to be the last video on naming and that naming would be perfect forever. But, when there's confusion like this, I'm thinking about, in the end, well, some of it's about myself and fielding all these calls, but also the consumer, and the consumer just trying to understand what's going on. And I don't know how the consumer is going to know what's going on with all these name changes and number jumping and everything else. I think AMD should get behind these brands, Ryzen, Radeon, and push just a basic understanding numbering scheme going up. And, even with your boards, AM5, motherboards here, this is the socket. We're going to have the 600, then we're going to have the 700 that all support this. Then we're going to have the 800. Maybe that goes to AM5, maybe it is AM6. Right? And everyone knows that these increments are going to be there, and whenever AMD wants to reset it, it is reset back to, 110, 100, 1000, 10,000, something logical, not 300. Not, why don't you go like 1300 AMD, or 1 million? What do your numbers mean? What does the naming mean? Get the brand down, get that name rock solid. And Ryzen has a good name. You could even, for me, AMD, you could even go as far as dropping off the Ryzen 3, 5, 7, and 9. Just do Ryzen, 9,000 and do it. I get it. They have the 8,000. That was the on the desktop side. I even feel like some of that naming needs to get cleaned up. But just keep it clean. And all these companies have had a a video or me saying what about this name, but you have to make it easy for the consumers and market as such. Put it as, market it, with all these features. Push that side of things rather than, if you're throwing money into figuring out naming, you're spending too much money in this stuff, especially when you're copying Intel and Nvidia. With that, let me know what your thoughts are, since I've rambled on enough about the naming of AMD products, if you've been keeping up with the rumors that have been going on, or what else is there. What would you like to see in naming? I'm sure that you guys have much better naming schemes out there for AMD than what they've decided on. With that, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, hit another bell icon, or hit the bell icon and watch another one of my videos, as it really does help out the channel. And until next time, God bless.